Right, and let me just see if I understand this. If you're GM, you want to preserve a relationship with your customers where they buy a new car every 2 or 3 years. So now you're going to put a car on the road that instead of having 4,500 parts has one moving part, so you're going to go 500,000 miles before you even need a tune-up. Right. So, and I understand that, but I don't understand why they didn't know that in the first place. I don't understand. They must have known what they were building. Why did they build something knowing what they were doing that was sabotaging, cannibalizing their own business model, and then say, we don't want to do this anymore?
Well, there were several reasons. One, they recognized early on that the world oil supply is finite. Mm-hmm. I mean, depending on who you talk to, there is a term called peak oil. Peak oil is defined at that point in time when we're extracting the most amount of oil that can be extracted on a timely basis from the earth. And all the surveys on reserves, whether you count shale oil, oil sands, tar oil, whatever form of petroleum you want to count, most analysts believe we hit peak oil already. Mm-hmm. That means as we go forward with the existing 850 million cars we have in the world today, the oil supply is going down. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, you have to look at the fact that we have emerging economies, China, India, Indonesia, who all expect, as they do better and get jobs and employed, they want a car.
Right.
They want to drive.
So what you're saying is that there were factions probably within GM and Chrysler at the time in the 90s, innovative factions over here who said we can do this, and then there are business factions over here that said, well, maybe you can, but you shouldn't. Replaced by now, 15 years later, pretty much unanimity. Why? And I do, by the way, I know the people behind the Chevy Volt and the Nissan Leaf and the iMEV of Mitsubishi, and I do believe and trust them.
Well, I would tell you what was different back then, and it actually had to do with an economic issue. The Congress passed a law in the 80s called ERISA, and the law simply stated that if you and I own a company, and we have a defined benefit plan. We're saying to our employees, you work till you're 65 and you're going to get this much money in retirement. If we made that promise to our employees, we had to have the money in the bank. Well, up until that point, many corporations, like General Motors, were betting that they could take that money out of future sales. So they didn't have the money in the bank. ERISA was passed, all of a sudden their capital reserve requirements went up $47 billion. So they looked around and say, we can't do everything we want to do. We want to modernize our current plants. So they took a look and said, we're killing the electric vehicle right now.
I see. That's interesting.
And now, so it was an economic decision. Now they're having to pay for it because the other car companies, Toyota, Nissan, didn't make that decision. And in terms of technology and deployed hybrids or electrics, they're way ahead of GM. Because GM's now having to pay that money now to develop and get vehicles in the field. Mm-hmm. So, and the car companies, all the car companies, doesn't matter whether it's GM or whether it's Nissan, they're all struggling with this issue. If I build a car today and my business model, and I'll use GM as an example, they wanted to put you in a Chevy first. And then you moved up to a Pontiac, and then when you got to be an old guy, I won't say where, but an old guy, we want you in a Cadillac. Right. And that was the progression. And they wanted to sell you a new car every 3 years. And so they constructed and they designed and they put the product. So after 3 years, the styling had changed enough, the features had changed enough, you desired that new car after 3 years. Well, simply an electric vehicle, the drivetrain is so simple that it, like you say, it'll last 500,000 miles. So if you drive 20,000 miles a year, you know, it's going to be
half a lifetime or whatever.
It's going to be a long time before anything wears out.